I was 45 and tired, working long shifts as a vet tech in Fairhope, Alabama. It's not a job that gets you rich, but I always thought I could scrape together a life, a home, some dignity. My sister, though, she lived in a world of handouts and excuses. Our parents handed her a house when she was 24. A nice one, too. And she ran through it like it was disposable, burning money on failed Etsy stores and influencer gigs that never paid out. Still, they propped her up. She was the pretty one, the fragile one, the one with the potential. Me, I was just the dependable brother who'd always find a way to clean up after her. I bought my own place when I was 35. Small but mine. Paid every penny myself. Took extra shifts, did side gigs, said no to vacations. It was hard, but I did it. And I told myself that at least I could count on having a place that was mine alone. Then, 3 months ago, Dad called. He said it was urgent, that he and Mom needed to talk. I thought maybe he was sick. Maybe something was wrong. But no. They sat me down and told me that they needed me to help my sister. Apparently, she'd lost her house. Again. This time it wasn't just bad luck. It was fraud. Some business she was running collapsed, and there were whispers about unpaid taxes, lawsuits, maybe even a federal investigation. She needed somewhere to live with her kids. And Dad said my house would be perfect. Said I was doing fine, that I could spare it. I laughed. Not the good kind of laugh. The kind that scrapes up from your stomach when the world finally tips over. I told them no. I told them absolutely not. And for a second, they both looked at me like I'd just spoken in a foreign language. Like the idea of me saying no wasn't even in the realm of possibility. That's when the threats started. Subtle at first. About how maybe the inheritance wouldn't come my way if I didn't help family. About how my sister's kids needed stability, and wasn't I the one always saying family came first. But it got nastier. Dad let slip that he'd been consulting a lawyer, that technically the house could be transferred if they declared me unfit. That they could bring in a locksmith and movers if I didn't comply. I told them I'd call the cops if they tried. But I didn't really think they'd go that far. And then they did. It was a Tuesday, and I was working a double at the clinic when the call came in from a neighbor. Mrs. Crowley, the one who always kept an eye on the street from her porch, said she saw a moving truck pull up to my house. Said there were men unloading boxes, a locksmith working on my front door, and my dad standing there like he owned the place. I felt my stomach twist into a knot. I left work early, heart hammering, speeding through every stop sign between the clinic and home. When I pulled up to my street, there it was. My front door wide open. A couple of unfamiliar guys hauling my furniture onto the lawn like it was a garage sale. My sister's SUV was parked crookedly in the driveway, stuffed with plastic bins and a couple of terrified-looking kids in the back seat. Dad stood there, barking orders, while a locksmith fiddled with the door handle, clearly trying to rekey the lock. And there was my sister, arms crossed, acting like she was already the new queen of my home. I slammed the car door so hard it echoed down the block. I didn't even yell at first, just marched up, phone in hand, dialing the sheriff's office. The dispatcher asked me what was happening, and I told her plain and simple. There were people trespassing on my property, trying to take over my house. I said I had all the paperwork to prove it was mine. The cops got there faster than I thought they would. Probably because I sounded calm and precise, and probably because it's a small town where everyone knows everyone. The officers rolled up in 2 cruisers, stepping out slowly like they were ready for drama. Dad tried to explain, said it was all a misunderstanding, that they were just moving some things in. The locksmith had the nerve to shrug and say he was just hired for a job. But I had everything ready: deed paperwork, mortgage statements, proof of ownership. I handed it over, calm as I could manage. The officer took one look at the papers, then at me, then at the circus happening on my front lawn. He turned to my dad and sister and said they needed to leave immediately. I swear, for a second, Dad looked like he was going to argue, but then my sister started crying big, dramatic tears, and it was all over. They packed up fast after that. Movers threw boxes back into the truck like they were on a timer. The locksmith muttered something about not wanting trouble and got back in his van. I stood there, watching them go, feeling something crack open in me. Not anger, not exactly relief, just this weird emptiness, like all the years of holding everything together for them were draining out at once. And then, this is the part that still makes me shake my head. I went inside, locked the door behind me, and sat down at the kitchen table. There, in the middle of the table, was a half-empty glass of iced tea I'd left that morning. Like none of it had ever happened. After that day, I thought maybe, just maybe, it would be over. that Dad and my sister would realize I wasn't gonna roll over. But they didn't stop. If anything, they escalated. I started getting these text messages, snide little barbs, passive-aggressive reminders about how selfish I was being. My sister even posted on social media vague references about how families should stick together, how some people forget their roots. People who didn't know the full story chimed in, offering her sympathy, sending her messages of support, like she was some victim of my cruelty. It was almost laughable. Almost. Except there was something bitter in the back of my throat every time I saw those posts. I'd always been the quiet one, the helper, the one who didn't ask for recognition. And here I was, painted as the villain in a story where I'd done nothing but try to protect what little I'd built. I talked to a lawyer just in case. Not because I thought they had a real case, but because I needed to be ready. The lawyer told me flat out that unless they had proof I was mentally unfit or guilty of some crime, they couldn't touch the house. But he also warned me, people like them, when cornered, tend to lash out. He said to keep records of everything, texts, voicemails, emails. So I did. I started saving screenshots, backing up my phone every night. Then came the real twist. I was at work one Friday when a woman I barely knew, someone from the front office, came up to me with a nervous look. She said there was a man in the waiting room asking for me. Said he claimed to be from some property management company my parents had hired. My heart dropped. I excused myself and went to the lobby. There he was, a smug-looking guy in a cheap suit, holding a clipboard and pretending to check something off. He told me he was there to inspect the property. Said the house had been reassigned under new management, and they were there to evaluate it for occupancy readiness. I almost laughed in his face. I told him he was mistaken, that I owned the house, that no management company had any claim on it. But he just smirked and handed me a letter, on some fake-looking letterhead, claiming my parents had transferred authority over the property. I read the letter, and it was so blatantly fraudulent I half expected it to be a prank. But it wasn't. My parents had gone to the trouble of creating fake paperwork to make it look like they had the right to hand my house over. That was it. The last straw. I called my lawyer on the spot, sent him photos of the letter, and asked him what to do next. He said it was time to go public, to make it clear that my parents and sister were attempting fraud, and to let the authorities handle it. The thing about people like my dad and sister is they don't believe you'll actually fight back. They count on your silence, your guilt, your exhaustion. But I wasn't that kid anymore. I wasn't the son who quietly took the blame, or the brother who bailed them out of every mess. I was tired, and I was angry. The next day, I went to the county clerk's office and filed a formal complaint about the fraudulent paperwork. I brought everything: deed copies, bank records, the fake letter, texts, and emails. The clerk gave me a look that was part sympathy, part disbelief. She said it wasn't the first time she'd seen families pull stunts like this, but it was rare to see someone stand up to it so cleanly. She promised to forward the information to the district attorney's office. That evening, I got a call from the lawyer. He said the DA was opening an investigation into potential fraud and unauthorized property transfer. Apparently, the fake paperwork and the attempt to forcibly move in crossed enough lines to be considered criminal, especially since I'd caught them in the act and documented everything. For a while, I thought maybe Dad would come to his senses. Maybe he'd call me, apologize, try to fix things. But no. Instead, my sister posted another cryptic social media update, hinting at how she was being targeted, how she and her kids were struggling, and how some people just didn't care about family. Her friends flooded the comments with support. And I just sat there, watching it all unfold. A mix of bitterness and something almost like amusement bubbling up. The audacity was breathtaking. A week later, a process server showed up at my door. Not for me, though, for my dad. The company he worked for, used to work for, was suing him for breach of fiduciary duty. Turns out the stunts he pulled with my house were just the tip of the iceberg. There were irregularities in his accounts, mismanaged funds, and whispers of more. I didn't feel triumphant, though. I just felt tired, like the air had gone out of the room. I sat in my kitchen, staring at the walls, wondering how many years I'd spent trying to please a family that only ever saw me as a means to an end. I wasn't their son. I was their safety net, their backup plan. And now that net was gone. A week after the papers were served, I got another surprise. A knock at the door. This time it was a local reporter. Word had spread about the investigation into my dad's finances, and someone at the county office must have leaked the story. The reporter asked for a comment, said he was working on a piece about family betrayal and small-town corruption. I shut the door in his face. I didn't want to be part of some salacious headline. But the damage was already done. Within days, the story was everywhere. Not just in Fairhope, but picked up by a few regional outlets. The article painted my dad as a manipulative figure, someone who used his position to cover his tracks while throwing his own son under the bus. My sister's social media silence spoke louder than words. No more cryptic posts. No more sad emojis, just radio silence. I felt numb, not victorious, just hollow. Like everything I'd spent my life trying to hold together had crumbled to dust overnight. People I barely knew started texting, asking if I was okay, if I needed anything. Some of them probably meant well. Others were just curious. I ignored them all. One night, maybe a week later, I sat at the kitchen table with a beer and stared at the blank wall where a family photo used to hang. I'd taken it down the day I found out about the will. That wall had always felt like a shrine to the idea of family. A reminder of holidays, birthdays, and those few rare moments when we all pretended to be whole. Now it was just an empty space, and for the first time it felt honest. Like maybe I'd finally stopped lying to myself about what we were. That night I finally slept. Really slept. The kind of sleep that leaves you groggy in the morning but somehow lighter, like a weight has been lifted. When the dust settled a bit, I realized just how much silence had filled the house. The phone stopped buzzing. The text stopped. No more fake apologies from Dad. No more guilt-tripping messages from my sister. Just nothing. It should have been a relief, and in some ways it was. But there was also this sharp ache, like the sound of a door slamming shut in a long, empty hallway. I went back to work like nothing had happened, but I felt everyone's eyes on me. The way people glanced, whispered just out of earshot, or avoided meeting my gaze. In a small town like Fairhope, gossip spreads faster than wildfire. And when you're the guy whose family drama just made the news, you can feel every stare like a pinprick. There was one moment, though, that made me pause. I was restocking supplies in the back of the clinic when Dr. Evans, my boss, came in. He didn't say much, just grabbed some gloves. But he did something he'd never done before. He gave me a firm nod, a small but solid gesture of respect. Like he was saying, I see you. I know what you're carrying. And for the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of something close to pride. That night, I sat on the back porch with a cup of coffee, staring out at the dark yard, thinking about everything that had led me here. The years I'd spent trying to be enough. For my parents, for my sister, for anyone. And for what? A lifetime of being used and discarded. But now I had something they couldn't touch. My house, my peace, my name on the deed. I sipped the coffee, let the bitterness settle on my tongue, and whispered to no one in particular, it's mine, finally. But peace, as it turns out, isn't something you get to keep without a fight. A month after the news broke and everything seemed to settle, I came home from work to find a certified letter shoved into my mailbox. It was from my sister's lawyer, or rather, the lawyer she'd somehow convinced to take her case. The letter was thick with legal jargon and thinly veiled threats. She was suing me, claiming I'd unlawfully evicted her and her kids from a shared family property, citing some made-up agreement Dad had scribbled down months before everything blew up. I read it twice, felt the old familiar burn in my chest, and for a moment, I almost laughed. The absurdity was so thick it was almost funny. But here's the thing, I knew she was desperate. Desperate enough to try anything. Desperate enough to think she could twist the narrative one more time, to play the victim card and hope the world would believe her over me. I called my lawyer, sent him the letter, and his response was as dry and cutting as I felt inside. She doesn't have a leg to stand on. This will never hold up. But it's going to be messy. Brace yourself. So I did. I braced myself. I gathered every receipt, every scrap of evidence. I even found an old voice recording Dad had left me years ago, where he joked about giving everything to my sister because she needed it more. That one made me sick to my stomach to listen to, but I saved it. If they wanted to drag me through the mud, I was going to walk through it head held high, every step documented, every lie exposed. The lawsuit didn't go anywhere, just like my lawyer said it wouldn't, but it dragged on long enough to drain me in ways I didn't expect. Court dates, depositions, meetings. It was a cycle of reliving the betrayal over and over again. My sister showed up to every hearing looking put together, playing the part of the wronged mother just trying to secure a roof over her kids' heads. Dad didn't show up at all. I sat there, stone-faced, with a folder of proof so thick it barely fit into my bag. Every bank statement, every text, every email where she begged for money, where she bragged about her influencer lifestyle on someone else's dime. The judge wasn't buying her act. After the final hearing, he flat out dismissed the case, calling it a transparent attempt at fraud. My sister cried in the hallway outside the courtroom, loud and messy. I didn't comfort her. Couldn't. There was no room left in me for that. That night, I sat at my kitchen table again. Same table, same chair, same glass of water. I thought about the years I'd spent trying to be the good son, the good brother. About how I told myself that family was worth it, no matter how much it hurt. About how I'd swallowed every insult, every dismissal, every quiet act of betrayal. And I realized something: I was finally free. Not just from the lawsuit, not just from the threat of losing my home. Free from them, from their expectations, their manipulations, their belief that I would always be the one to make everything right. That freedom didn't feel like a parade or a celebration. Felt like silence, like breathing fresh air for the first time in years. After the court dismissed the case, things quieted down in a way that felt almost eerie. No more texts, no calls, no social media jabs. My sister disappeared from my life as if she had never existed. My dad must have gotten the message too, because he stopped trying to contact me. I thought I'd feel triumphant. Instead, I felt like I was standing in the middle of an empty room after a storm, surrounded by broken furniture and shattered glass. All I'd ever wanted was a family that valued me, that saw me as more than a wallet or a fallback plan. But here I was, left with the weight of what I'd fought to protect, and an emptiness that no amount of quiet could fix. I found myself standing at the edge of the porch one morning, looking out over the yard I'd worked so hard to maintain. The grass was patchy, the fence was sagging in one corner, and the flower beds were overgrown. For years, I'd kept everything pristine, a reflection of my need to prove something to them. But now I didn't care. The yard could fall apart. Let the paint peel, let the grass die. It was mine, and no one was coming to take it. In that moment, I felt a strange sense of peace. Not because everything was perfect, but because for the first time in my life, I wasn't fighting for someone else's approval. I wasn't fighting for anyone at all, just for myself. It was about 2 months after the dust had finally settled when I got the letter from Dad's old company's lawyers. The suit they'd filed against him, it wasn't just a slap on the wrist. They were seeking damages, serious ones. There were documents attached, detailing how his mismanagement and shady dealings had cost the company thousands. I wasn't surprised. Part of me wondered if this was why he tried so hard to muscle in on my house. He'd seen the walls closing in and thought he could secure something before it all collapsed. But the thing that struck me most was how quietly it all happened. No dramatic scenes, no desperate phone calls begging for help. Just silence, like he'd accepted his downfall. Maybe he thought I'd step in to save him one last time. Maybe he finally realized I wouldn't. I stood there with the letter in my hands, feeling nothing. Not anger, not pity, just a simple, flat finality. This was the end of whatever story we'd been telling ourselves about family.
No redemption, no dramatic reconciliations.
Just me, standing in my own house, holding a piece of paper that said more than words ever could. I folded the letter, put it in the drawer, and made myself a cup of coffee. The kind of mundane act that somehow felt profound in its simplicity. I sat on the porch, sipping it slowly, listening to the quiet hum of life around me. The world kept turning, the birds still sang, and I, finally truly, was alone, but whole. A few weeks after I'd put Dad's letter away, I woke up one morning to a knock at the door. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I hesitated, half expecting some new twist. But when I opened the door, it was just the mailman, holding a small, plain envelope. No return address, no markings. Inside was a simple card. On the front, just the word, sorry.
No note, no signature, no explanations.
I knew it was from my sister. I could tell by the handwriting, her shaky, almost girlish scrawl that always reminded me of how she used to write thank you notes as a kid. I stared at the card for a long time, not sure how to feel. It wasn't enough, not even close. But it was something. A tiny crack in the wall of silence she'd built around herself. I didn't respond. I didn't call, didn't text, didn't reach out. Instead, I placed the card on the shelf next to the deed to my house, the house that was and always would be mine. And as I stood there, a strange sense of peace settled over me. Not the kind that comes from forgiveness or reconciliation, but the kind that comes from knowing you've survived. That you've seen the worst of people and come out standing. I took a deep breath, turned back toward the kitchen, and said quietly, to no one in particular, "It's done."